Howdy, folks. Welcome to another episode of the Preparedness Podcast, the podcast that brings you the best in preparedness information. You can find us online at thepreparednesspodcast.com. My name is Rob Hennis, and I'm the host for the show. You can reach me at rob@prepcast.info. You can also contact me through the Contact Us form that's on the website. Today we're going to be talking with Charlie McGrath again, and we're going to be discussing some aspects of what we can expect now that the election is over. As you know, I typically avoid politics in general. However, there are times when you do have to consider the political structure or the political environment as it refers or relates to preparedness, because quite honestly, much of what we have to prepare for is directly due to some law or some legislation or something that is coming down the line. And in this case, one of the big things is the economy. And as you have heard me say, the economy is not going to change simply because we have a new administration or the same administration or new senators or the same senators. It doesn't matter. No one man, no one administration is responsible for the mess that we're in and what's coming down the line. Before we get to the interview, just a couple things I want to mention. If you haven't taken the listener survey, or if you haven't signed up for the weekly tips, head on over to the website and you'll find access to both of those on the left-hand side of the site. The listener survey is put out by PodTrack. They're the company that actually tracks all the downloads on the podcast, which is why we know we are now over 400,000 downloads. Again, thank you to all my wonderful listeners for that. But it helps us learn a little bit more about your listening habits, and there's an opportunity for you to leave some comments, both good and bad, about what you like and dislike about the podcast. That helps us put out a better show, all that information, and it's completely anonymous. Likewise, if you would like to receive a weekly preparedness tip, go ahead and sign up for, it's called newsletter, but really what right now all I have is the weekly tips. I am actually thinking about putting out an RSS newsletter soon, but for right now it's just weekly tips. You can go ahead and sign up there as well. That is pretty much it for announcements. So let's just go ahead and I'll play this interview that I did with Charlie just a little bit earlier this evening. Hey Charlie, thanks for coming back on the show. I appreciate it. This is Charlie McGrath from WideAwakeNews.com. He's been on the show once before. Actually, it turned out to be two podcasts. And now that the election is over and a lot of you are done crying or cheering or however it may be for how you voted, I thought I'd have Charlie on and we could discuss, now that, this big political hoopla is over, where he sees we might be going and what might be in store. As you know, Charlie is pretty much a red-blue doesn't matter sort of guy, and I think that's fine because I pretty much feel the same way. I don't really think there's too much difference between the political parties, and that's one of my big beef is that they're too much the same, and they won't really allow more than two parties. It's always Democrats and Republicans, and if anybody else steps out of that preset mold, they're pretty much railroaded out of the process, which that's my biggest beef. So anyways, Charlie, how are you?
Good, man. Thank you very much, Rob, for having me back on. I enjoyed being on with you, and I enjoyed getting you on my program as well. So I'm happy to be here. And you're right, the hoopla, the big dog and pony show, the big charade, the big propaganda fest, however you want to break it down. I'm telling you, nothing frustrates me more. Honestly, nothing frustrates me more than living in a nation that has had to endure. I'm not even going to go back to, some people take it all the way back to the creation of the Federal Reserve, all this, but anybody that could just live through the last 8 years, or let's go back just a little bit further, since the introduction of the Patriot Act till now. And anybody who lives through that period of time and cannot understand, even after being exposed to the truth, that there is absolutely no difference between the policies when the doors are closed between the red team and the blue team. There's absolutely not one iota of difference. And if you think that that sounds crazy and ridiculous, please, I beg you, wake up, man. It is time to understand where we're at, because when you understand where we're at, you can look around the rest of the world and you can see where we're going. And where we're going is Greece. In fact, we're far worse off than Greece, because we're sitting with 55 grand per person in debt, every man, woman, child. Greece is sitting there with 39,000, and they're rioting in the streets because austerity has been implemented there. But to think that Obama, Romney are going to come in here, clean house, turn the corner, put us on a sustainable path to recovery is a utter, total pipe dream. And like I said, when I bumped into people yesterday after this election, and they're wailing and gnashing their teeth because Romney didn't get in there, I'm just like, man, have you not been listening? Have you not had eyes to see over the last several years what's going on? It has nothing to do with the political stripe, the color of their political stripe. It has everything to do with serving special financial interest, and that's where we're at. So I guess the next thing you talk about is where we're going.
Right. Well, and I just want to point out for my listeners, because I do not touch on politics very much, and the reason I don't is primarily because preparedness, like we talked on your show, when you had me on, we were talking about preparedness, but preparedness pretty much is non-political, non-religious. It's very much about getting ready. However, it is, I think, important to understand where some of these problems are coming from, because it helps people understand that, just because you vote a new administration in, or a new senator or whatever, nothing's changing. I mean, Obama did not create this mess. Now, nope. he added to it, but so did the last president, and the president before that, and the president before that. So
let me give you some examples. Let me give you a real quick synopsis of where we're at, and this phony two-party system that has us. Rob, people are fighting amongst themselves right now in this country. This country is extremely divided, and it's divided. I believe, I truly believe this with all my heart. This is part of the agenda. So we'll rip each other to shreds rather than look at how we got here and who got us here. But let me give you a couple of examples. 2007, George W. Bush was the president. George W. Bush started the bailout phenomenon that we still live in to this very day. But in 2007, the unemployment rate, the U3 number, 4.6%. 2012, after trillions of dollars that have been spent rescuing banks and billions of dollars in stimulus, and taking the participation rate at 63% in 2007 and whittling it down to 58.8% in 2012, a multi-decade low, we went from 4.6% to 8% unemployment. Main Street not being helped there. Personal income, or household income, median income, $55,039 in 2007. We've fallen by $5,000 to just over $50,000 in 2012. The net worth, this one kills me. Net worth of an average person in this country, $126,400 in 2007. 2012, it's $77,300, 39% decline. 39% decline, again, with billions, hundreds of billions, trillions of dollars that have been spent. $2.73 trillion in government spending in 2007. Again, another 39% number, 39% increase in this example. So we have a 39% decrease in net worth, a 39% increase in government spending from 2007 to 2012. Now, the neocons that are out there are going to say, well, yeah, this is Barack Obama. This is the Democrats. Bull. It is absolutely not. It started under George W. Bush, and then it continued under a bipartisan flag during the last 5 years, because when the cameras are off and when the microphones are not on and the big oak doors are closed, these people are not blue or red. They're green, and they serve the green. They serve the special financial interest, write legislation that benefits them, takes your financial future, destroys it, and gives it to these too big to fail institutions. One last point, and I'll shut up about this. To prove this point to be exactly that, true, listen to the statistics I just gave you, and then listen to this one. Wall Street banks in 2007. Wall Street banks in 2007 controlled 66% of the economy, or the deposits. 66% of the money went through these firms. In 2012, after your net worth fell by 39% and your spending, because the government spending is what we get saddled with, went up by 39%, Wall Street went from 66% of the economy to 74% of the economy. That monster increase in 5 years, which is double even what it was in the 90s. This is the true party system, the Green Party, the party that is of, for, and by special interest banking. And at the end of the day, when this all plays out, and we're seeing it play out right now, because the day after election, 300 points down on the Dow, the day after, 100 points down on the Dow, Greece rioting, people fighting in the streets. It's like a war zone in Athens. That is coming here, and we already hear the talk. Fiscal cliff, tighten our belt. It's going to get tough. I mean, this is what's coming to this country. This is why it's so important to listen to programs like yours. Preparedness is the key. There's no stopping it. It is coming.
Right, and that's exactly what I want to convey. Is, nobody. My show isn't going to change anybody. I'm not gonna be able to have the impact that doing a political show is going to do. But I want to make sure that everybody understands.
No, I disagree with that wholeheartedly.
No, I meant as far as doing politics. I'm not having you want to talk about politics because I think I'm going to change anybody's mind or anything. I want people to know that I've been looking at preparedness in the economy for almost 3 decades now, and I remember being concerned about the economy in the late 80s, and when I looked into it, it was like, hey, you know what? This is unsustainable. And it's really amazing that it's lasted this long. But it just keeps getting worse. And eventually we're going to hit that cliff. And I thought it was really interesting that during the big debates and the run up to the election, neither candidate's talking about the debt, the deficit, the financial cliff, the fact that we can't pay for this, the fact that we're just printing money out of thin air, and not talking about the major military threats we have, nuclear Iran, an EMP attack. I mean, these are very real things that need to be addressed. They don't want to talk about that. But the day after the election, suddenly all the news or all the financial news is all about the financial cliff. It's like, really? Now you're going to pull this out after we've supposedly voted, another president. So
yeah, exactly.
It's very
right.
aggravating because it's I don't want to believe that this is how this country is run. I don't want to believe that there's nothing that we can do. I don't want to believe that. But at some point you have to look at the system and go, you know what? Okay, it seems to be all about money. There's certainly not bailing me out. I'm certainly not too big to fail. Where's all this trillions of dollars going? Well, it's going to banks. And the bailout to banks is helping banks, not helping me, not helping you, not helping the common man in the street. And all it's doing is creating a burden, a financial and monetary burden that we are all going to have to suffer. Not the bankers, we are.
That's exactly right. And I'm going to back up to, you talked about the debates. And the first debate, it was on the economy. The whole thing, the hour and a half, is supposed to be about the economy of the United States. Not one mention of the Federal Reserve, not one mention of the European debt, not one mention of Ben Bernanke, not one mention of Tim Geithner, not one mention of anything that is of substance that is truly going to affect your bottom line. And that's exactly the point. Your bottom line is the one that's shrinking. Wall Street's is the one that's increasing. The numbers don't lie. 39% decrease. Theirs is a massive, massive increase. That's where these trillions of dollars are going. And you're right. The day after the election, I was shocked. In fact, I called our mutual friend Chris Atkin of Buy Emergency Foods, and I said, man, I think you better ramp up your production. You better, they're keeping up with orders, but I said, I think you better be ready for an onslaught, because I cannot believe we didn't even get a 2-day or a 3-day or a week or month afterglow period with this election. I mean, they were right at it with more talk of war, the European crisis blowing up, the Dow Jones crumbling. So yeah, they're going full bore right now.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting because I'm working on a podcast about inflation, because I think we're being lied to about inflation, because it could be something as simple and benign as they don't want to pay more for Social Security, which is at least part of it. But I don't think they want to scare anybody either. And they don't want to tip their hand as to how bad it is. But, I've been working on this podcast, doing a little bit of research, and my figures, and I haven't actually vetted this yet, so let's not hold me to it, but my figures show that we've had about a 20% inflation in gas in just the last 3.5, 4 years. It's like, whoa. 20% inflation, that's massive inflation. That's not just the 2.3 or 3.2 or whatever they say we have. I mean, that's double digit, not just double digit. That's far into the double digits. And so, it's amazing.
That's accurate. Your numbers are, they're not far off. Matter of fact, it might be right on the money with fuel. And you've seen food, in some cases, in the last couple of years, go up 100%. So the everything can be massaged, right? We can say that there's 7.9% unemployment, but if we look at the way we calculated it in 1933, well, guess what? We have a higher unemployment rate now than we did in 1933, the worst year of the so-called Great Depression at the time. It was 22.9%. I'm going off memory here. 22.9% in 1933. If we calculated the unemployment rate in the United States in 2012, right now, the exact same way, we would be at 23% unemployment. So you can, they cook the inflation numbers. They cook the recovery numbers by spending $1 billion on the economy, washing the economy with cash. But while they're spending $1 billion on programs and on stimulus and on cash for clunkers and that kind of thing, they're funneling billion upon billion to too big to fail banks to wipe away their failure and transfer it through sovereign debt onto the people. And this is the game that I think is going to run onto the shore here real soon. And there's some people that think we're going to go another 10 years. We can go down this road for another 10 years. There's other people that are amazed that we're not there already. I'm kind of in the middle of the road. I think we're going to see a real change in the way that the United States, the standard of living in the United States is, starting right after 2013, or starting right after 2012, beginning of 2013. And I think we're going to see, first thing we're going to see is a governed by crisis event that's going to cause us to have to, hear things like it's time for the American people to knuckle down and we all got to come in here together. Then you're going to start hearing about austerity. Then you're going to start seeing things like long-term unemployment being done away with, or 47 million people on food stamps is just too many. Social safety nets will start to get pulled back. And when that occurs, that's when the what's going to hit the fan, because there's over 50% of the people in this country are receiving some kind of a check from government in one form or another. So you start pulling that back, and the realization that our unemployment rate is worse than it was during the Depression of the 30s, the realization that the only reason that we don't have bread lines in the streets is because we have electronic bread lines through food stamps. When you start taking that back in the name of austerity, that's when, man, you're going to be super glad that you listen to your program and prepare. And that's why, you say that you don't think it's going to change anything. Well, I would argue that it does more good than me, because I come out on my program and I talk about these statistics and try to show the corruption. But you're actually telling people, look, it's inevitable. We're going to have some kind of event. So get ready for it. So, I do appreciate both sides. We do need people out there crying foul, but we also need people like you out there saying this is what you do about it.
Well, and that's why I had you on, because I don't really touch on these topics. I don't dwell on the political aspect of it, but I do see that as important. I mean, a lot of people follow politics and stuff, but I want everybody to understand that, just because it's a new administration, or actually it's the same administration, but just because there's been an election or whatever, nothing's changed. Even if Romney won, nothing would change. The economy is still terrible. They're not going to magically create jobs. They're not going to magically create money into your bank account. And we need to understand that we need to look at the long-term issues, the long-term problems that are facing us, and making sure that we, even if it takes 10 years, we need to make sure that we're prepared. And if it's not us, then we need to make sure that our children can have some place safe to come back to. Because that's what I always look at is, if my kids, my kids are young, but in the next 10 years or so, they're going to start branching out on their own. If they run into any troubles or the economy gets bad or whatever it is, I want them to have a safe place to come back to. And so that's what I'm trying to, part of what I have in my mind when I do my preps is, okay, not just me and my wife and my kids for now, but I also kind of have to look forward and say, what else does that mean? Who else might be be there. My son in 5 years might have a girlfriend, and who knows? I may have to take care of her as well, because that's just what family does and stuff. But I think we talked about this the last time we were on. I went through a couple months ago, and I started doing some unemployment numbers. My figures show about half of the working population isn't working, which is clearly far more than what we're being told. But like you said, we don't count it the same way. And so you need to be prepared. You need to understand that the financial cliff that they're alluding to is terrible. Now, back in episode 119, I pointed out the internationalman.com had this the 11 stages of a crash, and it was very clear in spelling out exactly what happens in a crash. And we've already had stage 3. We're waiting for stage 4. If you haven't heard that, or if you're not familiar
with I've heard that.
For you or the listener, go back and take a listen. But the signs are very clear, and I actually think it's speeding up. And again, I think I've said this more than I need to, but I want to make sure that people understand that you need to buckle down even more now going into 2013, just to make sure that you aren't caught behind the curve. Because as soon as it tips over and that ball starts to roll faster and pick up speed, it's going to be too late. Food will increase in price. Gold and silver are going to skyrocket. Tangible goods are going to skyrocket. Cotton and clothing and shoes and water filters and food and stuff is just going to skyrocket. And you're going to be like, holy crud, I cannot keep up. I can't make these last minute preps that I wanted to do because it's too late.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I have heard of the stages of collapse. So there's another theory, which is generational dynamics, where the generation that the generation that lived through the depression of the 30s, they're basically gone. There's not very many people around that remember that. And the theory is we repeat that history doesn't necessarily repeat exactly, but it's very similar through this 80 to 100 year cycle. And the fall cycle, which would be this collapse stage, fall into winter, is most assuredly where we're at. A lot of people think the fall began under Reagan, when we started spending money we didn't have in order to build out a military, and then we really began to hit the winter cycle in 2007, 2008, with the financial shock to the world. And if you follow this, and it isn't just this theory. There's a lot of theories about cycles and collapse and crash. And all of them point to the same thing. You have a reset that is always 100% of the time very painful for the average person. That doesn't mean everybody's going to be out in the streets, but it means there's going to be a lot of people out in the streets, and it means the standard of living is definitely going to change. So to sit back and look at where we're at and not plan for a crisis event. And it doesn't have to be man-made necessarily. It could be natural disaster or whatnot, but not to plan for it with the evidence that we have right now. Just the financial evidence, the unsustainability of it, or the geopolitical evidence, which is we're a new war footing almost every single day. Day after the election, we're shooting down drones over Iran, our drones are being shot down over Iran. These things are going to pop. And we don't have to pretend that it's going to be a decade or 2 decades down the road. We can just look back at the governed by crisis and the inevitable crisis that we've seen over the last several years and understand that it's coming probably sooner rather than later. I do believe that in 2013, Rob, I believe we're going to have a crisis of reality, I call it, which is from 2007, 2008 till present. We've been treated to all kinds of little crises, right? We've been treated to the crisis of the financial collapse, which I believe was a warm-up to the big one that's coming, the crisis of reality. And out of that, we had crisis give us legislation such as stimulus, crisis give us legislation such as NDAA 2012, all the way back to the Patriot Act, crisis that gives us a super Congress, because 535 members of Congress was just too many opinions, so they shrunk it down to 12. And this 12 is supposed to come up with a deal to reduce our deficit spending. That failed. So they gave us the next crisis is going to be the crisis of the fiscal cliff. Now, all these little crises that occurred between then and now, and I'm going to go back. I'm going to go back to 2001, from the Patriot Act to now. Every crisis event, every crisis legislation, every scare tactic that's been implemented has brought us everything that we see right now. Get on an airplane, you're going through a naked body scanner, a blue shirt's going to check your ID. Look at the government, you see it's not functioning at all. It's divided left and right. So we get legislation that is done behind closed doors, an executive order, or whatever the case may be. But every time this legislation is written, it's taking more of your freedom, personal freedom, and more of your financial freedom and giving it to somebody else, either giving it to the government or giving it to financial special interests. I believe all this has been done for one reason, because when they unleash the crisis of reality, or when the crisis of reality occurs, they will have the apparatus and the legislation and the infrastructure in place, not to help the people of this country, but in order to control the people of this country. And I know that might sound conspiratorial to some of your audience, but understand this. NOAA, Social Security Administration, TSA, Department of Homeland Security, they're not buying hundreds and millions and billions of rounds of ammunition in order to fight foreign terrorists. They're doing it because they know something's coming. And when it hits, it will truly be a shock, a crisis of reality to most people in this country. And I believe it's going to be in the form of a sovereign debt, nuclear exchange, sovereign debt landmine that's hit that everybody's going to feel.
Yeah, well, I'd like to point people to back to Matt Bracken's article, I think When the Music Stops, and it's basically talking about what happens when the austerity hits the inner cities or the urban areas where the EBT cards don't work anymore and the money for the social programs are pulled back. I think when you look at that article and you look at these little red flags over the past decade, and they're speeding up, the ammo that's being purchased, the food that's being purchased by all these government agencies. And then they say things like, oh, no, that was a clerical error. Really? I don't really believe it because, put it this way. I want to believe it. I don't want to believe that the government is corrupt as it is. I believe in the Constitution and I believe in law and government. And so I want to hold on to these ideals. But when you look at the facts and you look at this piece of evidence and this piece of data and this little news story and you put it into perspective, and then if you go back and you do a little digging in history, and I'm not a historian and I don't really delve into history all that much, but there's this a couple podcasts I've been listening to about history, and they're talking about the Roman Empire, and it's like, wow, this is really similar to what we're going through here. And so, there's a reason why they say history repeats itself, because the people in charge, it's the human spirit, the human person, the human being is the type of person we are. We don't change. We may have more technology. We may live in better caves, but it's still the same type of person. We're motivated by greed, hunger, power, and there's a cycle here, and it always continues. Now, does it really affect us to a point where we can go out and do something? Well, we've tried. We've seen the Tea Party try, and we've seen that pretty much usurped into, it's impotent now. I haven't seen anything major come out from the Tea Party other than some tweets on Twitter. Mm-hmm. When it first came out, it was great. It was like, yeah, the people are standing up and making their voice known, and it just kind of died.
Yeah,
and
look what happened to it. It was grabbed onto, and I marched in 2007 when Bush started handing out $600 checks, and that was a stimulus. And that whole movement, I believe, was for the most part truly organic in nature, and people were just sick of overreaching government, out of control government. And we saw that get taken over by the red team, and then pigeonholed way to the right in the red team camp. And then you saw frustration a few years later when the economic conditions started to bear fruit, which was we're in a depression, and you saw the rise of the Occupy movement, and then that was quickly. And you know what? I interviewed all kinds of people from the Occupy movement, and a lot of them were the exact same people that I was marching with in the Tea Party movement. They're just people fed up with out of control government, and that was grabbed onto and made a liberal or left leaning cause. So the frustration's there. It's very real, and you're right. When austerity hits big urban areas, It's not going to be like anything I think we've ever seen.
No, not in this country. Maybe not since like the 1960s. And yes, I was born back then, but I have no recollection because I was way too small. But I think that we're going to see far more violence in the streets and uprising and stuff. And I know you've got to go soon, but one of the things I think we can maybe try to plan for the next time I have you on is I've been noticing, and I find this interesting and almost a little bit disturbing, that the people that are on the left, they're railing against certain ideals and certain issues, and then you've got the people on the right that are railing against their certain ideals or ideas and issues and things that they have problems with. And I'm curious, and I know we don't have time to get into it now, but what I see these issues on the left and on the right, they're coming together. And I don't mean political issues as far as Democrat, Republican. I mean the things that the people who have a left-leaning bent are complaining about and they're railing about, and they're saying, hey, this is not right, are starting to get closer and closer to the same things that the people on the right are complaining about. And I'm like, you know what, there's got to be some significance to that, because typically, except for maybe the past couple of years, I mean, before that, they were quite separated by a wide margin. What the things that the left was concerned about wasn't even close to the things that the right were concerned about. Well, I see emerging there. I see a melding of common issues, and I think that says something for the current state of way people are feeling about the economy, about the government, about where things are going. And I think it'd be a really interesting conversation for us to kind of banter about and see where we go with that.
Yeah, no doubt. And you're right, it is. And you're right. I've got to go do my program here in a minute, but it is. And what I found, Rob, over the last couple of years is when I've interviewed people from allegedly red team or blue team, even mainstream guys, it doesn't take very long to realize that their core thought on government is the same. Their core thought that government's out of control and it's serving special interests, it's the same. And it's a very concerted effort by a mainstream media in Washington to keep us separated in these different camps. Because, if we're fighting amongst each other, we're not looking at the true people that brought us here. So that would be an excellent topic for the next time I come on, no doubt about it. You know what? I do want to say this. I mentioned earlier, Chris Atkin of Buy Emergency Food. He's the one who originally hooked us up, and we've exchanged interviews now on multiple occasions, and I want to thank him for that. But guys, this stuff we're talking about, I'm not doing this for the heck of it or for the fun of it. I truly believe this is coming. I truly believe that you need to listen to programs like Rob's and understand the necessity being prepared, and if long-term storable food isn't in your already in your repertoire to be ready for uncertain events, then make it so and get over to buyemergencyfoods.com and take advantage of low prices that they're still that we still see on food items.
I agree, and thank you for that. I appreciate it. And likewise, the reason I'm having you on my show is so people who want to delve more into the political aspect of what's going on, and maybe either they already know and they're looking for more information, or if they need to be exposed and kind of woken up as to, hey, there really is only one side and you need to be aware of it. WideAwakeNews.com is a place you can go and find some great resources. Charlie does a lot of interviews with people. He's got a lot of videos. Is it a weekly program or is it twice a week? I forget.
My radio program. It's a nightly, Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. West, okay. 5 p.m. West to 8 p.m. or 5 to 7, 2 hours nightly.
And they can find all the information out at wideawakenews.com, right?
Yes, sir. WideAwakeNews.com.
Awesome.
You got it.
Hey, Charlie, I know you got to go. You got a few minutes before your show, and I appreciate it. I'm going to try to get this out tonight, so it should be up. Thanks again, and I look forward to having you on next time, and we can talk about
Rob,
that.
Anytime.
Cool. And that's going to wrap up this podcast. I appreciate you downloading and taking a listen. You can reach us through the website at thepreparednesspodcast.com. You can reach us on Facebook at facebook.com/preparednesspodcast. On Twitter, you can find us as Prepcast. And of course, you can always email me at rob@prepcast.info. Until next time, enjoy life and be safe.